Chapter 28 A Sparkle in the Darkness, Part 1. A shadow loomed over the Crystal Empire, one so terrifyingly familiar and completely horrifying to all of the residents of the presently chaotic city. Its green eyes looked out over it all with equal measures of desire and disgust, both ethereal orbs promising divine retribution of the highest magnitude to all those who would dare take what was rightfully his, rightfully theirs. Midnight looked up at King Sombra as he regarded his subjects, holding a new appreciation for the power within that shadowy mass. A form he could hold indefinitely, while she had fallen from her own after such a comparatively short amount of time. The dark alicorn glanced towards the horde and stunned Draugr and, beyond them, the horrified ponies holding the line. Even with her newly embraced power, she had been unable to stop the undead by herself. She had been trapped in the middle of the crowd, alone and without a friend in the world. Those moments where she'd been certain of her own death, so alone and terrified beyond measure. It was like she'd been swallowed up by a wave of despair, ready to be spat out into oblivion. She only remained breathing now, thanks to Sombra. Alone, she had been almost defeated, just as he had twice before. But Midnight supposed that their path was now set. At least neither was alone now. They had each other. And yet she couldn't help but cringe as the traumatizing memory of those final moments returned in force, a hole of longing opening in her heart. But she had to ignore it, had to shake the feeling off. Her distant grandfather was no longer a specter buried deep within her mind. He was here. In his full glory, shadows already seeping into every crystal, Sombra lorded over the Crystal Empire. But even now it wasn't over, not yet. Not while the dead still existed within the limits of the city. They wouldn't for long.
My slaves.
Sombra's shadow addressed the large crowd of gathered ponies.
Gathered into a joint grave, the dead surrounding you at every turn. A hopeless fate, brought about by fragile freedoms, yet you still cling to those delusions.
A troubling chuckle reverberated throughout the Crystal Empire. It almost sounded like the very crystals themselves were laughing at the ponies. It even sent a shiver down Midnight's spine.
But you should not fear the dead. No. Your fears belong to me alone. Me and my proud protege.
There was a great murmuring among the gathered ponies, more than a few starting to take steps backward, or at least as many as they could take before bumping into the next pony directly behind them.
So, let us return to where you belong. Your safety awaits in chains, and your servitude is required.
The shadow started to vibrate and spill out further into the city. The effect was immediate. The crystal ponies erupted into a full-blown panic that the element bearers had been trying to prevent. Almost like all knowledge of the track's destruction was forgotten amidst the terror, the crowd began to try and push and shove their way towards the station.
Pathetic, as ever.
The Draugr, too, seemed to be stirred back into action. But rather than running away, the beast started to fire up at the shadow, much like they had Twilight Sparkle. Sombra turned to regard them with a withering glare, contempt growing in his eyes.
Leave the politics for later,
Midnight dismissed, lighting her horn with her own returning magic.
Let's deal with these creatures. I'm sick of them.
As you wish, granddaughter.
Then the shadow struck with a ferocity far greater than Midnight had ever considered. The world instantly went dark around the corrupted alicorn as the shadow consumed the entirety of the Horde's remnants. Even as she lit her own horn with light, she could barely see her own hoof in front of her face, or the crystal road beneath her hooves. Screeches of alarm from the remaining undead sounded somewhere from within the haze, continuing growls and retching as they fought something they likely couldn't even define. Midnight was tempted to return to shadow form herself to better understand what was happening, but her drained magical energy made her decide against it. But without it, it was like the very air itself was trying to probe at her mind, at her fears. Sombra likely hadn't intended it so, not towards her, but it almost seemed a part of his very existence to do so. More flashes of recent experiences crossed through Twilight's mind, from her fight with Celestia all the way to her near death from the Horde. It was disconcerting. She'd almost forgotten what it was like to be at the receiving end of such darkness. There was a feral growl from somewhere nearby, Midnight turning to see an equine figure shambling through the shadows. It gave a shriek, punching up towards the alicorn with the intent to kill. She caught the creature in her magic, slamming it down into the crystal so hard that it stopped moving immediately. She then tossed it somewhere back into the darkness, eyes peeled for further attempts on her life from the infuriatingly persistent abominations. More growls sounded behind her, the alicorn spinning to find two more of them coming towards her. She prepared her spell, ready to strike them down. And then a spear of darkness swam through the shadows, somehow distinct enough to just be seen. It shot through both Draugr, each one stopping in their tracks as their eyes began to glow a sickly green.
What are you doing?
Midnight shouted out to the shadows around her.
You're supposed to end their threat! Forever!
I never saw use in the mindless undead. Too unpredictable. Too stupid.
A hushed voice whispered along with the wind.
But these beasts are here. They are now. And they are mine.
Midnight's eyes widened, feeling sick to her stomach. Was Sombra serious? These monsters were a sickness. What if he lost control? Never mind that, their very existence was unacceptable. The things they had done. Her glowing eyes flickered a moment as doubt started to eat away at her mind once more. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the darkness started to recede. The light of the sun returned, allowing Midnight a view of the city around her. The Horde remained for the most part, though they all now shared that distinctive glow in their eyes. So too had they become docile, rooted to the spot almost certainly by the king's demand. Sombra was in control of the Draugr Horde, ready to spread and convert at his leisure. And there was the unicorn himself, still a shadow high above the city. His eyes were once again locked onto the crystal ponies, those ethereal orbs looking almost jubilant.
Now, for you.
Sombra!
Those eyes were pulled away from his would-be slaves by Midnight's disapproving call, looking down to see his descendant glaring up at him. And then in response, the shadows started to shrink and simultaneously descend. Black crystals erupted from the ground beneath him as the visage of the unicorn returned, fully draped in his red robe and gray armor. He stood atop the crystal, looking down upon Midnight Sparkle.
Yes, Twilight?
He asked with an air of caution.
Twilight!
Another set of voices called out, diverting the eyes of both dark ponies. There, unobstructed by the pacified Draugr, were her friends. All 5 mares and the young purple drake looked at her with a mix of trepidation and determination. A distance behind them, looking like they were preparing for another fight, the Crystal Guard were gathering at the behest of Cadence in shining armor. Whatever it is they were about to do, The element bearers had clearly been sent to try some diplomacy first. And now, Midnight stood with them on one side and Sombra on the other, each giving her expectant looks.
Them again?
Sombra asked with clear annoyance.
Radiant was never this infuriatingly persistent.
I have no idea who that is, but maybe she should have been,
Pinkie Pie shouted.
Girls, it's not safe for you here,
Midnight stated.
Get behind the line. Now.
No can do, Sugar Cube,
Applejack denied with a shake of her head.
You're further in the muck than Winona during rain season, and we gotta save y'all.
Save?
Sombra scoffed.
I believe she is trying to do so to you, though your appreciation is clearly limited.
Shut it, you psycho shadow!
Rainbow Dash snapped.
We're talking to our friend.
Yes, insults. Your lack of—
You heard her.
Midnight interrupted.
Shut up.
Sombra blinked.
What did you just say?
You were not meant to use those things.
Midnight shouted in a rage, gesturing to the Draugr with a wing.
They're wrong. Just wrong.
It is up to us to decide such things,
Sombra arrogantly claimed.
To use any means necessary to defend what is ours. Do you not want to keep these fools safe?
Who are you calling a fool?
Rainbow Dash blurted out.
That aside,
Rarity started.
Darling, you know that this is wrong. I understand you want us to keep us from getting hurt, truly I do, but this isn't the way to do it.
Fluttershy decreed with forced confidence, taking a trembling step forward.
Forcing ponies to be your slaves? I don't want to be safe if that's the way to do it.
None of us do.
Applejack agreed with the Pegasus mare.
It's crazy. No pony wants to be in chains.
But you saw what happened there.
Midnight shouted.
I should have been able to stop that. But now ponies are dead because I couldn't. If I can plan and organize everything, then we can stop it from happening again. That's what control can give us.
At what cost?
Is there a price for safety?
Sombra jeered.
Do you not see how they reject your gifts? This is why we take. There is no understanding for those below our station.
Is that how you see us?
Pinkie Pie asked sadly.
But all friends are important.
Let them not fill your head with such folly,
Sombra urged.
The step has already been taken. We must work quickly to consolidate our control. There will always be dangers to strike away at all you love, unless you stand with me now. You have resolved to restore us to what we were, and this is the moment of our victory.
Midnight was at war with herself. As much as the Draugr were wrong, their very nature horrible, a small part of her could see the practicality in their continued usage, at least until the power base had been secured. But where would this lead? Would she find herself in another position of hopelessness, alone and without her friends? Friends who didn't understand truly why she acted the way she did? But this wasn't about her. So what if that did happen? Her fate wasn't what mattered, only those of her friends and family. She could feel the dark magic still flowing through her veins, the sheer strength her new form granted her. She could craft Equestria into any form she wanted, research the most viable course, and implement it to the letter. Only they would control the flow of history thenceforth. She could protect them all. Midnight took a step towards Sombra.
Twilight?
Midnight turned her head, her eyes widening at the pleading, tear-filled gaze of Spike. He was shaking, almost like he was holding back a complete emotional meltdown. Only a single glimmer of hope sparkled in the corner of his draconic eyes, but he was holding onto it with everything he had.
Would you be happy?
He asked.
Would we? Sombra doesn't look happy.
The king growled. Excuse me?
I want the risk if we can go back to how things were.
He continued.
I don't want to be safe if it means no one can be happy. Especially not my mom.
The glow in Midnight's eyes vanished.
Spike.
He's right. No pony will be satisfied with the world Sombra wants for us.
Applejack agreed, placing a sympathetic hoof on Spike's shoulder as he started to cry.
Not us. Not y'all. Would it be worth it?
I would say the risk of normal life is worth the moments we can spend together.
Rarity agreed with Applejack.
I couldn't imagine it any other way. Imagine if we could never share a party ever again,
Pinky said, aghast at the idea. Fluttershy gasped.
Oh my, how horrible. Think about it, Twy,
Rainbow Dash stated.
You do this, you go alone. But without that guy up there calling the shots, we'll always have your back. What happened back there? We would have helped you if you had just asked. Or any one of us might get our flanks kicked, the whole bunch of us can keep on going. We love you, Twilight,
Spike concluded.
We just want you back.
She stood there, her once again lavender eyes staring wide with shock. How could she have been so blind? From the moment she had taken the mantle of Midnight, it was like her soul had been screaming. Pain had fueled her darkness, but she had believed it would all be worth it just so long as they would all be safe in the aftermath. But could she say it was worth it? Would they be safe from them? Their suffering in Sombra's chains. Could they truly be called safe? No, she wouldn't be happy. She wouldn't be happy because they couldn't be happy. No pony could. Every pony loses. Even Sombra. The alicorn let out a slow breath, a warm glow spreading throughout her body as she turned back to Sombra. And then, when her eyes opened again, Twilight Sparkle gave her ancestor a resolute smile.
They're right. Of course they're right,
she said calmly.
I forgot for a moment. So scared of losing them, and with everything you were telling me, I would have lost them anyway. And I would have been the threat that took them away.
What is this? Sombra bellowed in rage.
That was how you lost Radiant Hope,
she continued.
That was how you lost your son. You could have been with them for all your days, if you hadn't given a reason for Celestian Luna to stop you.
You agreed with me, Twilight, Sombra stressed. You chose Midnight. I never forced it upon you.
True,
she admitted.
I guess I have to live with that now. But that's okay, because now I'm more certain than ever.
Twilight glanced back at her friends, their moods clearly brightening as they all came to stand by her side with victorious grins and sighs of relief.
Friendship is magic,
Twilight recited.
That's all the protection we need.
And then Sombra shouted. It was a terrible shout, one filled with rage and loss. Indignation oozed from him at having been thwarted once more at the last possible second, to have all his teachings gone to waste, and at being rejected once more.
You shall not have her!
The king stamped down with a hoof, the crystals erupting all throughout the Crystal Empire in one massive display of power. And alongside this, the Draugr once again got some life in them. Their eyes flashed as they started to growl, looking around and locking onto the crystal ponies to continue their assault.
Sombra, stop!
Twilight begged with growing horror as the fighting restarted anew.
It's over!
I know you believe in me, deep down within you,
Sombra growled.
and if it will return you to my side, I will destroy your friends and show you where friendship leads!
Another stamp of his hoof, his horn glowing with its putrid magic as 6 shards of crystal sprung into the air with jagged edges like spears. And in but a moment, each one struck forth towards their intended targets around Twilight.
No!
Twilight's eyes lit up with dark magic, sending out a wave of pure shadow that resonated with all the crystals it touched and reduced them to mere atoms. In response, she cut the stream of dark magic and switched out to her usual mana, letting a beam of destruction magic build up in her horn until it was unleashed upon the structure Sombra stood up on. The magic caused the crystal to crack and shatter, causing Sombra to start falling until he morphed into shadow and reformed a moment later amidst the rubble.
Let's get him!
Rainbow shouted.
Wait!
Twilight said while holding out a hoof.
It's my turn.
Sombra snarled.
Your turn for what, dear Twilight? You are not my equal in the dark magical arts, and even in the light you are exhausted and diminished. You cannot defeat me. You cannot protect them from me.
You're right. And you're wrong.
She claimed.
You'd have been up against all of us, the elements of harmony together. But despite that, it's my turn to talk some sense into someone who sorely needs it.
What?
Don't you see? Don't you listen?
Twilight started sincerely.
Everything you've done, what I almost did. It'll just make us as miserable as the pony Sweden's slave. Radiant didn't love you
Don't!
after what you did. Not the pony you became. Your son. What would he have become under you?
She then asked.
Would he have lived a happily married life? Would he have been what he was?
Silence! You are not above discipline.
Neither are you.
She retorted.
But you still have me. I'm still here. All you have to do is stop the Draugr and end this.
But you won't be safe,
He calmly claimed.
You will never be safe. There will always be something to snatch you away, just like I lost the rest of my family. Our dynasty will live on. It has to. I will not be swayed by friendship's lie.
Maybe not.
Twilight said with a sad smile, lighting her horn.
But through darkness, I'm lost anyway.
Her horn started to brighten, and then crackle and pop dangerously. She started to build up pure mana with little direction or control. All eyes turned towards her in both confusion and shock, but Sombra's particularly with dawning horror.
Twilight, stop!
Like we said back in the Everfree Forest,
She recalled.
inverting a normal spell, unlike shadow form, tends to be a little dangerous. Especially if it's intended to kill.
Twilight, what in Equestria do y'all think you're doing?
Applejack protested.
If he doesn't stop, he's going to lose me anyway.
Twilight said with finality.
It's his choice.